Juries. Juries have been used in trials for a long time, and the reason we have juries in criminal trials is because of this principle, judged by your own peers. Juries are not legally qualified people, just like magistrates, and they are used in trials to decide whether someone is guilty or not guilty. Most criminal cases are dealt with in magistrates' court, and juries only deal with 1% of criminal cases. Juries are also used in some civil cases, for example in the county court and the High Court. In the county court, juries will sit as a group of 8 and they'll listen to defamation cases, false imprisonment, malicious prosecution and fraud. Juries in the county court decide liability, and they also decide the amount of damages someone is awarded. They're also used in personal injury cases, but that's very rare that they'll be used. Juries also sit in the coroner's court, and they sit as a group of 7 to 11 people, and they inquire about the nature of someone's death. Most often, as I said, juries are used in criminal cases, and they sit as a group of 12 and they decide whether somebody is guilty or not guilty. And the judge, their role is to help to assist the jury on points of law, and the judge will also decide sentencing. Now, how does somebody qualify to be a juror? You need to be between 18 and 70, and you need to be on the electoral register, so that means that you need to be registered to vote, and you need to have lived in the UK for at least 5 years and not be seeking asylum. Juries, there are certain things that might disqualify you from being a juror. So for example, if you're mentally disordered, that means mentally disordered in accordance with the Mental Health Act. And that might mean that you've got some disability or impairment that means that you can't make a decision on someone's guilt or innocence. It might be as well that you have some disability that doesn't allow you to hear evidence or see evidence that is presented to you in court. You're also disqualified from being a juror if you've been imprisoned for life, you've served time imprisonment for more than 10 years. You can be excused from jury service if you're serving in the armed forces, or you are excused if you present a good enough reason as to why you can't do the duties that a juror would need to do. Now, selection. At court, you are selected. There is a clerk who is responsible for selecting names of the electoral register, and summons are sent out to these people to say that they need to come to court, a Crown Court, on a specific date, and they must attend unless they're disqualified, ineligible or excused. Jurors are vetted to make sure that they do have the right skills and abilities needed to be a juror, and they're also vetted to make sure that they haven't got a criminal record, and in cases of national security they may be subject to a wider check on background as well. Jurors may be challenged for cause, so that means if they know the defendant, and a whole panel may be challenged for biased selection, so that means that they'll be challenged to make sure that they are not biased in any way, so they don't have a racial bias or a political bias that might affect their decision-making ability. And the prosecution may stand by any juror, so that means that the prosecution have got a right to challenge certain jurors. Now, the jurors that are selected for a criminal trial, like I said, have to make a decision about guilt and innocence. So they have to listen to all the evidence that's presented to them by the defence and the prosecution. They need to listen to any instructions from the judge, and they need to come to a decision. And they need to select one person to deliver the verdict to the court. They must try and aim for a unanimous verdict, so that means that all jurors must reach the same decision, and sometimes that might take quite a long time to do that. Sometimes the judge will accept a majority verdict where some jurors are unable to come to a decision together. Now, the role of juries is, like I said, to make a decision about someone's guilt or innocence in a trial, and to help them do that, they have to make their decisions in secret. Once the jury have listened to all of the evidence, they then retire to the jury room, and it's very important that nobody else other than the 12 jurors is allowed to go in there. And they need to come to a decision, but they can use any method they want to come to that decision. But it's very important that they don't talk about the case outside the jury room, to ensure that, you know, there's no one putting pressure on the jury, or, you know, information about the case can be found out. Juries also have this thing called jury equity. And that means that they don't have to follow precedent or past cases or even acts of parliament, and they don't need to give reasons for their verdict. They just decide based on what they think is fair and what they think based on the evidence, and following the judge's direction to them. And sometimes juries, you know, make big decisions in cases that are surprising or different to what legal experts might predict. And two cases that show the principle of jury equity are Ponting's case and the General Belgrano case. And they show two cases where this principle of jury equity has been used. And there's lots of advantages and disadvantages of juries, and, you know, these are things like public confidence. The public are very confident in the principle of using juries, and most people feel that it's a good thing to have in our system. However, some people believe that juries, there's no intelligence test for juries. Juries don't sometimes value being on jury service and being taken away from work, and sometimes some people say because of their inexperience and the fact that it's actually much easier to be acquitted in a jury trial, that suggests that juries don't actually know what they're doing, because they can never be sure sometimes altogether beyond reasonable doubt, because sometimes juries have to listen to some quite complex things. But I'll let you look at some of the advantages and disadvantages from your class notes and the textbook, and you must make sure that you discuss these and evaluate these advantages and disadvantages when writing about them in an exam question.